that Medicaid expansion still needs to be a priority across the state. Did not get that signal from the Speaker. However, that doesn't mean that 300,000 Missourians don't deserve access to health care just because someone says they don't. Ethics reform, obviously, is going to be at the top of our agenda. It's refreshing to hear from Speaker Richardson that they're willing to move forward on ethics reform. It's unfortunate that the elected officials in the state, that the scandals that have taken place over the years, that it's come to this to actually get ethics reform done. So we're very grateful that finally something is going to move on ethics reform. I think it's important to make sure that we continue to work to eliminate institutionalized injustice throughout the state. Last year, we made very modest progress in addressing institutionalized injustice with enactment of legislation aimed at curbing municipal courts from funding their governments through those fees alone. I think that was wrong, and I think we've made some at least small steps in that direction, but we can't stop there. And as Senator Kebney stated, education funding should be one of the top priorities of the state. We are still $400 million short of funding the foundation formula. So this is our promise to Missouri. That foundation formula was set to say that this is the minimum level of adequate funding. I don't know how we can expect our teachers and our school districts to educate our children properly when we don't give them the basic, just the very basic funding levels that we have promised them. I know that we're going to have some vigorous debate on the stadium in St. Louis. I think that everyone in the state would still like to see an NFL team. I know that there's a lot of controversy over how that's going to happen. I would say that both of our caucuses are very split on the issue. I think that maybe this will become a lot clearer in the future when we find out what the NFL's ultimate plans will be, and I expect some rigorous debate on how we fund that moving forward. I think that's kind of a moving issue at this time. And finally, I think we're going to have some debate on religious freedom and security. You know, I've heard some of the statements by some of the elected officials of the state calling for an end to allowing immigrants to get into the state for reasons of security. I don't know how anyone can say that that 3-year-old that washed up on the shore in Greece was a terrorist. I think that is a very disturbing thing that we're going to allow children to continue to die. Real ID is going to be an issue for us moving forward. In 2009, the Missouri House and Senate passed a resolution telling the federal government that we will not implement the changes to the Real ID Act. These were changes that were recommended by the 9/11 Commission to keep our country safe. And we said that we would not institute those changes. In 120 days, we may have a very serious issue on our hands where Missourians are not allowed to travel because those IDs are no longer valid. I think that's an issue we're going to have to fix. So with that, I think Senator Kebney and I would be happy to take any questions.
What do you think needs to happen on the Real ID issue?
Well, what we passed in 2009 was a ban on the state implementing the Real ID. I think if you look at what actually is required, we're not that far off from what we currently do with our IDs, but because we have specifically passed a law blocking us from telling the federal government that we are in compliance, we're going to have to remove that barrier that we put in place in 2009 as a minimum. Will we have to reissue driver's license to every resident in Missouri before they're allowed to travel? I can't answer that.
You've talked about the need to make sure that the foundation formula is fully funded. You've talked about the need to expand Medicaid services, which will cost the state some money in
Yes.
addition to whatever comes in from the feds.
That's correct.
Where does this money come from? Our revenue growth isn't that spectacular.
No, well, it could start with the fact that we didn't need to cut $800 million out of the state budget. We could have paid for it that way. As far as Medicaid expansion, we would eventually pay 10% of the expenditures for these low-income residents. I mean, let's be honest. These people are working poor. These are not people that are sitting at home just collecting a check from somewhere. These are people that are actually out in the workforce with 2 children trying to get by and can't afford to pay for their insurance. I mean, don't we owe them that at least to find a way to fund those? And we're talking about addition of 24,000 jobs for this state. The build out in the healthcare industry alone is going to create jobs. It's an economic, it's going to be an economic success if we did it. I mean, that's one way to pay for it. We're going to have huge growth by pumping billions of dollars into our economy.
But do you have any hope of overturning the tax cuts that go into effect in 2017?
Do I have any hope of
Any
it?
hope of doing that? You just said we could have had extra money by not cutting the budget.
Right.
That cutting is those tax cuts that go into effect next year. Can you get them back?
I think you should probably ask the Speaker of the House, the President Pro Tem of the Senate. They were the
Their
ones that.
answer would be no, because they think that was the right thing to do. So back to my question, where do you get this extra money to fully fund the formula and do these other things you say need to be done?
Well, as long as I've been in the General Assembly, it's been a shell game with this funding. It's a matter of priorities. Well, what we're seeing here today is healthcare and education should be a priority and not pushed to the side for some of these other pet projects.
What about infrastructure funding in the state? Because that's also going to take up a huge chunk of revenue.
I sat for 2 days during a filibuster over raising the gas tax for 2 cents last session. Quite frankly, I don't see a whole lot of relief. I haven't heard any relief of increasing any taxes in order to fund the infrastructure. Sure. That's going to be another topic of discussion. Hopefully we can get some kind of compromise. I don't think the residents of the state of Missouri care whether they pay $1.65 a gallon or $1.67 a gallon, but they don't want to be running into potholes all the time.
Senator, are you concerned there's going to be a Republican effort to take general revenue and pump that into MoDOT?
Well, there could be. And again, we're getting back to priorities. We can play the shell game all we want. There could I assume that you're referring to funding the highway patrol from general revenue and taking that money and that money still got to come from somewhere. The pie's only so big. Am I concerned? Sure. Because I don't think it's fair. I think that's just an illusion that we're giving to the public if we do that. So, yes, I am concerned.
Are the ballot initiatives out there to pay for transportation, are those potentially the better solution?
What I see, the fourth one that was filed today on the tobacco tax, or yesterday, that goes from early childhood education to treating kids with cancer to funding the roads. Who knows where that's going to go? In my own mind, I don't think the tobacco tax should be at roads. We ought to compare apples to apples. If we're going to fix the roads, let's dedicate the money to fix the roads, or float bonds, or go back and raise the tax.
For both of you, does the disruption to hundreds of thousands of Missourians in the flooding of the interstates, does that create any incentive in this General Assembly to provide a better chance of a tax increase going to the voters out of this session?
Well, I mean, if you look what MoDOT is beginning to say, that the money that they're going to need to rebuild some of these damaged roadways and bridges was definitely not on their radar. We're talking about some substantial costs to rebuild our roadways and our transportation network in general. I mean, something's got to give. Maybe that is correct. Maybe this is the nudge that's needed. But how they're going to rebuild those with the funds they have, I don't know, and maintain the current
Senator, you
transportation.
had proposed legislation that would bar discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Could you talk about the chances of that passing in this legislature, though, especially as we heard the speaker talking about religious liberty as being more of a priority or something he's looking at?
Well, first off, I didn't hear the speaker speak, so I can't answer to that.
Sure.
I wouldn't file the bill if I didn't think it had some chance of passing. I think nationwide, the climate is changing on that. I think it's going to take some effort in the state of Missouri to actually pass the bill. Last year, we did get it out of committee. A couple of years we've got it out of committee. We just haven't been able to get floor time. Hopefully we can do it. We ought to at least have the discussion. And I defy somebody that can make a logical argument that we should be embracing discrimination.
Where are you all on splitting up the highway patrol and the water patrol?
Well, splitting them up, I mean, we just got them together, right? Yeah, and, you know, it's, that's such a complicated issue, because we're talking pensions, we're talking times of service. I am opposed to changing it after only, I think we did in 2005. No, I wasn't here. We did it in 2010 or 11. So it's only been 5 years. It hasn't even had a chance to work yet. So I am opposed to splitting them up again.
The University of Missouri dominated headlines for a lot of reasons. This fall, Planned Parenthood and abortion ties, campus protests. There's been a call from the Republicans for the university to fire a professor and an staff employee. What is the role of the General Assembly in supervising the University of Missouri, and what action do you all think should be taken this year in that regard?
You want to do that, or you want me to?
If you want me to help beat up on a Senate colleague, I'm happy to do it. But I think that one man's political quest for Attorney General should not dictate how the University of Missouri operates in any way, shape, or form. It is our job to fund that university and not meddle in their affairs, period.
And there's a reason we have a board of curators there, and they're pretty intelligent, capable people. I don't think we need 190 legislators telling the University of Missouri how to run their ship.
They're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to influence decisions in this building, including hiring the son of the United States Senator, Republican United States Senator. Should there be a budget cut for those issues, and to tell them that in any way that they're spending money improperly?
Well, I mean, I think that issue's already been highlighted, and if I'm the university, I'm going to address that internally. As for, can we dedicate funds or restrict funds so that they can't hire a lobbyist? I don't think we have that ability. So I think just the overall perception and the political atmosphere is going to address most of your concerns there.
What role does the fact that they are in the state constitution play in this whole discussion? No other higher education institution in the state has a constitutional provision. So they're constitutionally independent. Does that play a role in this discussion at all, or is that a fact we'll ignore?
Quite frankly, I don't know the answer to that. I can't see how that would play into the discussion of funding or oversight. I mean, I don't know the specific article that they're mentioned. I would assume that when they put them in the Constitution, they also put in there that they're governed by a board of curators. I think it pretty much addresses the situation.
Gentlemen, what's a realistic expectation of ethics legislation? Because apparently it's going to be done in pieces, and maybe campaign contributions will be ignored.
I think this is a discussion that we have every year. I think this year there's an impetus to pass something. I am a little bit concerned that we're not going to pass everything that we should pass, but I think if we can make a constructive step, we can keep expanding on it.
What are your worries about the quality of the ethics in this body?
You know what? I got to tell you, after some of the transgressions last year, I kind of thought, am I walking around this building in a bubble? Because I sure didn't see any of this last year. So the more this gets put out into the public and the more that people are made aware of, I think we'll start to move things forward. You know, we can debate all day long about the revolving door, campaign contribution limits, and gifts, banning gifts. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but that's why we're up here. We need to deliberate this and have a serious discussion and try and get something passed.
How about shorter legislative session?
My wife would like that.
And I mean, Now, you can debate ethics legislation all you want, but the fact of the matter is this is the first time we're going to actually be allowed to debate ethics in this state. Bills don't get referred, they're killed in committee, they're not brought up for a vote on the floor, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Things have finally gotten so bad that this has forced their hand. So that's a bad thing that we've gotten to that point. It's a good thing that we've got a place to start and that we're going to be allowed to start.
Would you support a shorter legislative session in either chamber?
I don't know the answer to that, but
I mean, on its face, I would. Now we're going to get to the details, how short, you know, who knows? Every state, I think, has a different session. Some have off-year long sessions and short sessions. Yeah, we can talk about it. I don't know, but back to the representative's point, you know, now there's an impetus, now that everything's out there, a lot of that is the press deserves the credit because you're bringing this all to light. I mean, believe me, I wake up in the morning and when I see the headlines, I don't like to read them. I don't, you know, it's hard. But at least by bringing the issues forward, it's providing the impetus to change it.
The governor suggested a 30-day shorter session yesterday. A practical question, is there some point where you haven't given yourselves enough time to have these discussions, particularly on the budget, to do what you've been sent here to do?
the budget takes up an extremely long period of time. I mean, it's very complicated. Our members, I don't want to speak for the senator, but our members that serve on budget and appropriations committees, that's a very lengthy process. It's a lot to learn, it's a lot to take in, and it is an extraordinarily amount of information to sift through. And so from the budget standpoint, I mean, I think that takes as long as it does for a reason. I think to try to cram that part in would be harder to do than the rest of the bills that we would pass normally.
On ethics, is there a bright line definition for you all of this, this issue failed this year? Is it just that a bill passed? What issues need to pass? How would you define that?
Would we say if one thing passed versus another, that's a win or not?
Issues that if these don't pass, it's failed, or is it just a matter of getting a bill or some bills?
No, and I think everybody, all of the four top ethics issues, I think everybody, at least in the Senate, has a different feel for what priority they ought to be, what weighting they are. Some are adamant about campaign contribution limits. Some are adamant about a gift ban. So what's the bright line? I'm not sure there is, but it's going to be a blend.
I think what needs to happen is we need to fix this to a point where the public's perception of elected officials in the legislature is greatly improved. But the reality is that we've got 190 plus elected officials here, and the majority of them are very good people on both sides of the aisle. And we've got several bad eggs, and that has to be fixed. And, look at Congress, look at this, look at us. Elected officials are not always held in very high esteem, and that's probably because of what's been going on in the past. So we need to make sure that we do enough change that it makes a difference to the people of Missouri.
To follow up on that point, can the perception improve if campaign finance limits, which voters approved at one point, are not reinstated?
I think, first of all, I think those need to happen. I think that needs to happen. Several times this legislature has thumbed its nose at the will of the voters and overturned the will of the voters on numerous issues. I think that any time we do that, the perception is that those things need to revert back to what the voters said.
The line in the dirt issue last year was right to work. Everybody agrees that's gone away from this year.
We do?
Well, I mean, we've been here longer than that.
I'm happy in my other job. That's a good thing.
Saying it's not happening, so we'll leave it
Yeah.
at that. What replaces that vacuum? Is it voter photo ID coming back?
I think we'll have a long discussion about voter photo ID, yes. And you know what? And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? We're going to have a long discussion about photo voter ID without any valid IDs right now, right?
Well, your IDs are valid in the state of Missouri. The argument there is they just don't comply with federal law.
Right.
Is the issue there the supremacy clause? Are there people in this building who think that because Congress passed a law, we can ignore it?
Oh, there are people in this building. We pass bills like that all the time.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, guys.